You are listening to the Enormocast.
I don't know what's happening in your neck of the woods, but out here in the great American West, it's the start of desert crack season, which means two things. The bros are charging up their Bluetooth speakers, and people are wondering where the hell they're going to get enough cams. But Black Diamond has your back. On top of the heap are the Camelot Ultralights. Cams so fleet that Elon Musk once shot one into space strapped to a bottle rocket. And then there's the venerable C4, the cam that still rules the creek. And legend has it, if you whisper Camelot, Camelot, Camelot into a mirror while holding a red C4 to your forehead, the location of the easiest for you 12- will be revealed. And don't forget the dinky Camelot X4s and X4 offsets. But do forget about clean underwear if you start whipping on the .1 in sandstone. But wherever your crack reveals itself, remember, BD has you covered with the sweetest cams known to man. Check them all out at blackdiamondequipment.com or your favorite local shop.
We gotta get
Listen, where are you playing in town? You playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
big
big
house. We
place
sold
that
it out.
side of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold it out. 20,000 seats.
We really should.
The hell are you doing? I couldn't sleep. I'm checking the ropes. There was a frayed end on your rope, and I'm cutting it out.
Good weather, bad weather. Now or later, anytime. Good time.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, with support from Maxim Ropes.
And the fine folks at La Sportiva. And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enormo at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is March 3rd, about 10 o'clock here in Colorado. This is episode 146 of the Enormocast, a long overdue conversation with Northeast climber, currently, Majka Burhardt. And I'm killing several birds with stones in this one. Birds are being killed by stones over and over again. First of all, it is long overdue that I have Majka on. We sort of talk about it in the interview, so I won't get too many details, but she's tried to be on the show a couple times, and I lost the interviews for various reasons of ineptitude. So she's back. I think I'm going to make it through this editing session without deleting anything and have this out, I hope, in the future when you're listening to it through the amazing podcast Time Travel Machine. Also, got another woman on the show, always looking to have women on the show, and it's often raining men around the Enormocast, but got two in a row this time. I don't know how many times I've done that, but here we are. And finally, I don't know if this is a stoned bird or not, but I want to make sure and mention the American Alpine Club. They actually brought me out to Boston for their annual benefit dinner, and while I was out there, I took the time to head up into the Northeast and talk to some folks like Majka up in North Conway. So it was thanks to them that I arrived there to begin with. And even though I didn't get this one right at their event, I wanted to bring up the American Alpine Club. And we'll talk further and in more detail about them when I do run one from their event. But I want to make sure you guys understand that being a part of the American Alpine Club is something that every card-carrying climber needs to do. It's one of those organizations that has helped create the community that we so love. But also as a member, you get discounts on gear, you get discounts on lodging at their campgrounds, you get insurance, rescue insurance, and of course you're just supporting their conservation efforts, their bolt replacement efforts, their education efforts, and all the things that go into them promoting our community. So consider having a look. Go over there if you are not a member to AmericanAlpineClub.org. And look around, see what you get, see if it seems like a good idea. Really goes hand in hand with an Access Fund membership. Those are the two things, man. You got to have those two things. So have a look. Okay, quick apology for this one being late. It's only late now in the present. If you're listening to it months from now, it was not late. So again, the magic of time travel. In the future, I will be forgiven. But February got kind of out of hand with a lot of travel, including the trip up to the Northeast to Boston for the event, and then around New Hampshire and Massachusetts to talk to some people, which is going to be for our benefit because I got a lot of good interviews up there with some people that I wouldn't cross paths with normally. So this is the first one. Thanks again for listening and being so forgiving in the future when it doesn't matter anymore. All right, let's get to it. An interview with climber, conservationist, guide, mother, wife. What else? This woman has a lot of stuff on her plate. Majka Burhardt. Now, we all know that Sportiva makes the best climbing shoes this side of the Parthenon. But it turns out that even the most dedicated dirtbags have to spend an ungodly amount of time on the flats among the sad, lost, lowland civilians. And that's where Sportiva's approach shoes come in. Legends like the Boulder X can comfortably scramble you up slabs, boulders, easy pitches until the big guns come out. And for when you're not actually in the mountains, well, as you peruse the hemp milk selection at the whole paycheck, nothing says, "Don't fuck with me, I've climbed El Cap," like a brightly colored pair of TX3s that are relentlessly scuffing the floor. Bellied up to the bar for that post-near-death experience beer, let them know those gobies didn't come from labor with a pair of impossibly lightweight TX2s. After all, isn't the day-to-day drudgery just a protracted scramble to the next climb? Whether you're actually at the cliff or just standing up in your best friend's wedding, you better be ready in a pair of multi-sport approach shoes from Sportiva. Just basically like
pawing at
speed bagging her boobs with his feet all night. Just and she would get him away, and he'd come. I call him the Tick, because he's like, if you sleep with him, he's the full-on little heat seeker missile, and so she was just saying he was just like kept coming over and like kicking her boobs.
Oh, anyway. Brutal.
Okay, cool. I have to start with my apology. So, I haven't used every single episode I've ever recorded. And I've screwed up some technically before, but you're my only two-time champion of where I screwed up both your interviews. And the first one was live, I think, right?
Yeah, it was oh my God, I forgot about that. Yeah.
And you were a part of the panel, and I just, whenever I used to, continue, the live ones are tough if I don't have someone there who's helping me record it.
Yeah. And
usually the climbing events, whoever's running the sound is just barely capable of that and doesn't really have, and a lot of times the equipment also doesn't have a way to get a sound out of there. So anyway, I screwed it up. I knew I was screwing it up while we were doing it.
Yeah.
And what I should have done is I would have just stopped the whole thing, but you feel pressure when you're like doing an event to make it like work. So I could see the levels spiking on my recorder, and I just didn't get up and go deal with it.
Yeah.
So anyway, that one was screwed up, but you were only one part of that one. And then to make up for that one, we sat down again at Aurora, like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And then
at your CD hotel room.
Yeah, my CD hotel room was the way. And then I accidentally recorded Stevie Haston right over you.
Oh, you never told me.
Yeah,
why.
I'm sorry. I know, and that's probably
I'm glad Stevie got to talk to you and it was recorded.
Yeah. So anyway, but I don't know what I still don't know what I did, but I just didn't.
Well, maybe we're supposed to talk now.
Yeah. So here I am. I've come all the way to North Conway, thousands of miles.
Yeah.
And
to repent.
Finally sitting in your office, and we're going to get this one done. So, as I recall, we talked a whole lot about conservation in Africa, in conjunction with climbing. And that is still ongoing. And so if you would mind picking up where you left off and maybe covering some of the basics about that, because that's I think it was probably 2 years ago. It could have been 3 that we talked.
I think it was 3. I don't think I was pregnant. So I think it was 3 years ago.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
God, time goes by.
I know,
fast.
right? Yeah.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah.
So the fact that
it wasn't even on the radar.
Right.
Yeah.
And the fact that you are continuing with that is a statement to, the power of what you created at that point. Because a lot of times, I talk to people about stuff like that, and then they moved on pretty quickly from things. So you're sticking with it. It's a passion and a full-on thing. So let's talk about that first.
Yeah, totally.
Give me the spiel.
So the spiel is that I'm the executive director of an organization called Legado, which means legacy in Portuguese and Spanish. And we work to protect the most vital mountain rainforest ecosystems by working hand in hand with the people who live in those mountains. So, largely a climber audience for the Enormocast, right?
Yeah.
Largely.
Almost, I would say.
90.
I hear once in a while from non-climbing listeners, but
all right,
I think they're pretty rare.
So I would say, if you talk to most climbers and you say, close your eyes and imagine an iconic mountain. Right. Most times they close their eyes and they think of these iconic mountain ranges like the Patagonia Massif. They think about, the Alps. They think about Denali. They don't think about people in this iconic image that they have, right? But the reality is that most of the mountains in the world, especially most of the mountains of the world that we need to actually give a damn about from a biodiversity perspective, have people living on them. So changing that image that we have as climbers, so when we close our eyes and see these wonderful mountains, that they're actually riddled with people. And the real nut to crack right now, I believe, in conservation is actually how to go about preserving these mountain ecosystems with those communities. Right. So that's the work that we're doing. And it's, me being a climber was super integral to starting this work, because I went to Mozambique to this giant 2,000-foot granite face and brought climbers up there to find new species of ants and geckos and snakes, and to catalyze this conversation about what it meant to bring mountain conservation kind of into the limelight in East Africa.
So it was a mission.
Yep.
To show or be aware that there's this environment up there?
Yeah, initially it was this idea I had to pair climbers, scientists, and conservationists to say, okay, if we all get together and we work together in one of these areas, what's the impact we can make? Mm-hmm. So instead of just doing a flash in the pan trip where you go on a climbing trip and you come home and you show people pictures and you're like, wow, that was rad. Instead of just saying, I'm a climber and I'm going to go take scientists climbing, it's let's go one more level. Let's actually say we are going to have an impact with the local communities here. What the heck does that mean? Right? And so what that's meant is that, that was in 2011 when I started with a pretty crazy idea and 4 people and $11,000 of funding.
So this Legado?
Yep, started in 2011.
You created it?
Yep.
Because that wasn't clear.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, so anyway.
Yeah, $11,000 of funding from the Petzl Foundation, Patagonia, and Osprey sent me over there with Sarah Garlick, who's another woman who lives here in North Conway, a geologist. Had a South African herpetologist. We all went over there and we're like, let's go see if this idea is going to hold weight. Because if you can't actually climb this thing, then this whole idea is going to fall apart. If the science isn't valid, this whole thing is going to be BS. And most importantly, if the communities don't want you to be there, then you have no place in being there in the first place. And all those things checked out, and it launched what is now, we just raised $1.5 million last year to create one of Mozambique's newest community conservation areas. We are working at scaling our model so we can use it on all these other mountain areas, not only in East Africa, but around the world. Because the situation is remarkable where I'm working on Mount Namuli, which has exceptional biodiversity, all these endemic species, things that only live on Mount Namuli. The scientists go wild for that kind of thing. And it also has 10,000 people encircling the mountain who are basically living with that mountain and pulling all the wood from it and cutting down the rainforest, because that's what they need to do to actually live in a way that they can survive. So how do you shift that dynamic? And that story isn't unique to Mount Namuli. That story replicates itself across mountains all over the world. So it's sometimes I explain to people, what you live in Carbondale, right? Is that the Roaring Fork Valley?
It is.
All right. So I bet that there's at least 15 local grassroots initiatives for conservation in the Roaring Fork Valley that are grassroots. We're going to protect this creek behind our this watershed here. We're going to take this canyon, right? Well, that grassroots conservation that actually gets the people involved who live and breathe in that environment, that's kind of the ticket to the way things work right now, especially in the US, right? We don't form 16 new national parks, or we do, and then our asshole president comes along and tries to take them away. So Mozambique can't have 15 new national parks. That's not going to work for it. But if you can bring grassroots and make it global and make it go back to being local in a place like Mozambique, then you're actually helping people have the ticket to preserve their own spaces on their own terms. And that's the work that we're doing.
So you're up against, huge tradition in terms of the way these people live.
Yep. Yeah.
Maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of years in a sense.
Yeah.
So how is it that you approach these communities with this idea? And then,
get them to be interested in what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then what do you? I guess this is a whole nother question, so maybe I'll have to come back to it again. Yeah. But and then what are the resources that you can provide, or even because like raising $1.5 million for a little climbing thing that started on 11,000 is amazing, but then
so what does that mean? Like, what are we doing with it?
$1 million is when facing the lifestyle that needs to be changed. I mean, it's not very much money.
Awesome questions. Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately what it comes... So, first of all, when you say, you're trying to change practices that have been there for hundreds or thousands of years, that's totally true. And you also have to realize that, 100 years ago, there wasn't as much pressure on all the resources that are there, right? There's more and more pressure every year as populations expand and as people start, trying to move higher and higher into this mountain area to cut down forests because they can no longer cultivate the fields that their grandfather cultivated because their grandfather owns those fields. So the young people who are in their 20s are like, well, where's my field? And they're like, oh, cool, I'll look up there. I'll go take down that field. Well, all of a sudden, it's the pressure of the resource. Right. So on the one hand, it's shifting ideology, but on the other hand, there are already pressures in place that you're responding to. Mm-hmm. So a lot of this comes down to the fact that like anything that's going to happen on Mount Namuli has to be locally led, right? Like this can't come from an outside source. This has to effectively be like intrinsic to the people who are living there. They have to make this choice. So it's all about behavior change. It's all about, working with people to say, is this a resource you want? Is this mountain, you start talking about something called ecosystem services. Mm-hmm. And what that means is like, all right, so where do you get your drinking water? How do you, where are your fields? Okay, what's the value of that? If you could no longer drink that water, what would you have to spend money? Like if you're talking to people who don't actually spend money for that stuff versus like me who has a water bill, right? It's a different conversation, but eventually you get to a value that you can place on these things, the services that your ecosystem provides for you. And so once you can have a conversation with that about people and say, okay, so what if that was gone? Like how would you live? How would you actually feed your family? Then people can start, you can start talking about what it means to preserve that space. And, a lot of times that preservation is different than how we think about in the West in terms of like, put a huge gate around it, nobody's going to go in. It's all about concentric circles of use. It might say like, this is the priority rainforest where, we need to have these corridors intact for all these species, but then all these areas around it have different levels of use so that that community can still live there, right? And right now what we're doing is we're engaged in what's called a conservation agreement. We're literally negotiating with communities and saying, hey, we think this could work. If you guys think it's going to work, what do you need from us? Mm-hmm. What do you need for the next 2 years so you'll stop burning in the upland areas and preserve that rainforest so that for 2 years we can all come to the negotiation table and come up with a long-term solution? Right. Because it's like, and it's sort of like, it is a short-term solution, but it gives you the time to make a long-term solution that comes with huge economic, agricultural investment, right? And so ultimately, if this is a farming area, then you need to give people another way to farm. And you need to show, we do a lot of different things like permagardening and, conservation agriculture is another term people use to say like, can you get more value? Can you get more yield in sort of a restorative way out of these crops that you're using versus not to go like totally derailed in it. But when you do slash and burn agriculture, you're basically stripping all the nutrients from these fields. Right. So, in 4 years, they're done. But if you can approach them differently, then they can give you more value to your household and also to, if you're selling these crops, and they will be replenished long term.
I mean, you're up against kind of...
the world, life.
Well, the problem, I mean, the ultimate human problem, which is long-term thinking versus short-term thinking. Exactly. And, it's the, I mean, there's also the physical or whatever problem of population growth. But, so much of what we look at in these conservation issues, even climate change, is a matter of, now versus 50 years from now. Yeah. Or even 10 or 20 or, it's just like the seemingly intractable problem. I mean, But it also is, when we have conversations, for example, a lot of the elders right now on Namuli talk about the fact that so this is a place that Mount Namuli is the second highest mountain in Mozambique. It's the ancestral homeland for 2 million Lomwe people in the Mozambique and Malawi region. Mm-hmm. And it's just this giant towering, it's called an Inselberg. It's a granite island, protruding out of what was
what were rainforests way back in the day, and it's now savanna. So it's very well known, and it's oftentimes covered in clouds, so it's shrouded in more mythology because it's like coming in and out of the mist, and it's like, can you see Namuli? Does that mean someone's going to die in Namuli if you can't see Namuli that day? And people talk about the fact that there used to be more mist up on Namuli, like before people started using the fires. Like there's a knowledge and an awareness that things are already shifting. So I think that helps have a conversation about like, well, what happens if that shift keeps going versus being, walking in and saying, believe me, the sky is going to fall. Like that's a really hard position to be in. But if you can actually talk to people, and say like, okay, over your lifetime, what have you seen change? Okay, if we accelerate that, what does that mean that's going to be like for your grandchildren? Do you want your grandchildren to be able to live here?
Well, it sounds like you guys are, if you actually even have that going on where these people, are admitting that, these things are ruining. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's farther than the U.S. has got right now
exactly.
with climate change. It's really hot outside.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's like you just.
Well, we don't have like a freedom caucus or a tea party yet on Namuli trying to subterfuge this whole. I know.
There's probably at least guys that are. Yeah, probably going to pop up.
And there's resistance. I mean, this is not an easy situation by any stretch of imagination, Cluse. And it's, for me, I didn't set out to do the work that I'm doing now. I mean, I set out to. I wanted to. What the heck did I set out to do? I set out to say.
Yeah, what did you set out to do?
Hey, I've been going on, I keep pushing the boundary of my climbing and I keep trying to make it have more of an impact, right? And then every time I do that, I see that there's so much more that needs to be done and so much more that I could do and so much more that I'm uncomfortable about, right? It's like that edge where you're like, oh yeah, like I no longer was okay coming up with these ideas and just walking away and having them be in these little time capsules. I'm like, well, what would it mean if I was actually going to dig in? And, ultimately my goal in the beginning was that like we could create enough of a spark and someone else would kind of come in and take it up. But back in that time, all the big organizations I talked to, like World Wildlife Fund and Conservation International and all the big names in development were like, no, we don't want to work with you on Mount Namuli. We don't know who you are. You're some like weird climber person who runs these social entrepreneurship projects. And like, what's your track record? Why should we partner with you? And Namuli's a really hard area to work on. And that last piece was probably the biggest sticking point. Because that's the thing about mountains, right? Come on, we all know it. Mountains that's why we love going to them. Like they're freaking hard places to travel, to work in, to live in. And so you need different problem solvers to get in there and say, all right, this has been off the map of social services. The rainy season comes in and obliterates all of the paths and the roads. These are mountain people. Like they're super proud. They super don't want anybody else in their space. Like who's going to be the person to help craft a solution? Well, as it turns out, a mountain person.
Is there anything in that list of problems or that list of difficulties that you've been able to maybe even turn to your advantage?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing to the advantage is that we got scrappy when I went in there to work on this, right? Like this was not done in sort of the conventional conservation and development rubric. Like we brought in crazy different funders. We ran a Kickstarter campaign. Ethiopian Airlines, Lush Cosmetics supports us through Charity Pot. I bring in the whole outdoor industry community, Cliff Bar Foundation, Osprey, Petzl, you name it. And at the normal conservation table, people are like, how did you get those funders? And because they're used to things happening in a very different way. And so it's been to our advantage in that we've gotten a lot of notoriety. Mm-hmm. And I've been able to, I would say, push that and capitalize on that and be at the table with other organizations who've been playing in that kind of like in that arena for a longer time. Mm-hmm. And that has now, I mean, when we started, Namuli wasn't even mentioned. The mountains weren't even mentioned in Mozambique conservation mandate. Now Namuli is a name priority. Mm-hmm. And that's in part because of the work we did, the film that we made that, premiered at Telluride Mountain Film and showed at, 50
what
film
was that called?
Called Namuli, and showed at film festivals around the world. It's on PBS right now in various states in the U.S. It's like we upped the pressure, but it wasn't just pressure without action. It was also, I have a Mozambican team that we're partnered with, mm-hmm. and, we work full-time, day-to-day on Namuli, and we've been doing that since 2014.
And so you had this climbing trip that kind of opened this whole thing. And I guess my question is that, or maybe my comment is, this isn't about climbing conservation whatsoever, because I mean, this sounds like an interesting climbing resource. maybe not an El Cap destination climbing resource, so
it's run out slab climbing when you're slinging hassocks and grass chunks. Right, it's so like gripper.
It's of a very particular taste. And I guess I just wanted to point that out because, so much, there's an understanding, I think, a lot of times with climbing conservation is that we're trying to protect these places we want to use.
Yeah, this is not a place for climbers.
And that's been the big message for Bears Ears. It's yours. You need to climb there, and so we need to protect it. And so it's interesting because this is, like I said, you use this climbing kind of...
it's like climbing got me there.
To make it sexy, probably as a resource, or
totally.
But outside of climbing, because I don't.
Yeah.
Because I remember looking at it last time we talked, and I was like, probably not
on your list. Yeah, and exactly because it's cool, a giant chia pet, right? Yeah, like, why would you go there if you could like make other choices as a climber?
Right.
But if you are actually trying to say like, okay, if I'm trying to shift the global conversation on mountain conservation, hell yeah, you're going to go there.
Right.
And that's the piece of it. So it's kind of using climbing for me, climbing tricked me into it, right? And then now this is the work. And honestly, I wouldn't have known this about myself in 2011 when I started doing this, but I'm really passionate about how we can bring these types of mountains into the greater conservation embrace, because they're not. And that's the thing that I didn't know because I wasn't in the conservation world. I wasn't in the development world. It's like, those things.
Somebody's looking after
someone's taking care of them. It's like, nah, not so much,
Well, so you just said when you first went there, you maybe... it was a little bit of a different mission.
Yeah.
But what do you think if we want to go back a little bit into your personal climbing and or whatever path? You said you sort of realized this about yourself. Have you thought about like what led you there? Like why is it that this was waiting to be kind of opened up in you for so long? And maybe a little bit about what your life as a climber was like before that?
I mean, I think two things. I think when I was a kid, I loved the outdoors, and I grew up in Minnesota, and I canoed, and I was a ski racer, and by the time I was in high school, I felt more myself being on trail. I'd always talk about being on trail to all my friends. I'm like, you just don't understand when I'm on trail, like it's like this different existence. And then I'd be forced back into Minneapolis high school life and feel like I was like was being slowly muted out of my life.
I'm sure they really enjoyed hearing about that.
Everyone always wanted to have that conversation with me when I was wearing my cinchilla and with my Nalgene and had my baggy shorts on walking around high school.
Girl, let's get out of here.
Exactly. Like, oh my God.
She's on trail right now.
With the frizzy hair, run. And this other part of me also really, and I say this sometime when I speak about this, like I really wanted to run the UN. And I would tell people that. I was like, I might run the UN, like I loved internet. I did mock trial in school, right? Like I would pretend to be a lawyer and you'd like try these cases. And I mean, I loved academics also. So I was sort of conflicted because I kind of liked both of those identities. And then when I started climbing, I was, I climbed like more and more when I was in high school. And then when I was in college, I started climbing quite a bit and took a year off of school to climb full time and started guiding then. And I'd work for Outward Bound. And then, so all my on-trail time like manifested into me getting a job at Outward Bound, and then started guiding for the American Alpine Institute out in Washington State. And then I met you when I moved to Colorado to guide for Colorado Mountain School in 1999. But the thing is like no matter how hard I tried to climb all the time, I kept getting injured, right? Like I would be like in these car accidents, not my fault. Like, someone wanted to look at a moose in Estes Park and they pushed someone into my lane and I had a head-on collision going 45, miles an hour after I'd been in Estes for a year. I couldn't pull off this life of a full-time climber, this life of a full-time guide. It kind of forced me to have other things going on. And I think that was a great gift to me when I was in my early 20s. And it let me have time to like pursue the other things that I was really passionate about. And that for me, when I would be able to travel and I was traveling and climbing, I always, I was by that time I was a writer. So I was trying to tell this like bigger story. And there's only so many times you can tell a story of, wow, there's this really cool place and I'm going to go climb. And I climbed and the hand jam was sick and this funny thing happened. And then I came home. Like you can maybe make a career out of that. But ultimately for me, it just felt a little like vapid, and I'm like, okay, what's this other thing?
No, I understand because you had a column for a while.
Yeah, for climbing.
And I was always, not just yours, but whoever's, is like, how do they just keep pulling stuff out, you know? And I admire sort of the tenacity of it, but it's just like, well, how do they just keep finding this amazing thing? I always joke that, like, it seems like every time you'd go climbing or you know, something amazing happens and it's all like super meaningful. And I was just like, man, it must be exhausting. Like, some days I just go climbing and nothing happens and I'm fine. Like, if every time I went climbing there was like an epiphany, you'd just be like, Jesus, like, give me a break. Like
I gotta really get ready. I gotta climb like once a month, you know? I gotta really rein it in.
Exactly, because, you know, my mind is being blown. Like, anyway, so I understand that problem of, you know, just wringing the stories out of climbing because there's only like a few. And
to me, what was most interesting to me was never the stories about climbing. It was all the stuff that surrounded it, you know. And it's like, and the relationships and the. Because
here I am wringing stories out of climbing.
No, but it's like, exactly.
No, I mean, I understand.
You know, it's like, and it's also about like, sort of going into it with this brutal honesty, and I think that. I'd like to think, and I've heard from people that, like, when I did have my column and when I write with like a lot of sort of self-humor, and it's like, okay, calling myself on my own BS. And I think that, you know, that is kind of how I exist in the world. And then all of a sudden I was in Ethiopia in 2007 with a book deal to write a book about how great climbing is in Ethiopia and to bring all these people to climb in Ethiopia. And it turned out the climbing was horribly scary and shitty in Ethiopia. And moreover, that the larger conversation to have was like, how do you actually talk about adventure in the context of a country that had largely been known for drought, famine, and poverty? And like, that was way more interesting to me. And then that's what started this all for me. Right. It's like, wow, that's way more interesting. And actually, I think I have something to say about that.
How long ago was that again?
That was in 2007.
Okay,
so that was
a while back.
Yeah, that was a while back.
I was still writing, because I remember I got that book from you. I was writing for the Gazette, I think.
Oh, yeah, totally. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, that was in 2007. Yeah. And it's just, so for me, like, that opened this door to say, kind of, it's like, where am I uncomfortable? Where are the edges of this thing that I'm doing that don't feel right? And how do I need to explore that further? So, you know, then I was in Namibia after the book about Ethiopia came out, and we did a first ascent on the highest peak in Namibia called the Brandberg. Kate Rutherford, Peter Doucette, who's now my husband, and I were there, and Chris Ulster and Gabriel Gall were with us. And, you know, we had to rip all this dirt and habitat out of the crack to be able to put up this first ascent. And it was like damn worth it, because we put up this sick, like 511 plus whatever, like 1,800 foot beautiful granite climb. But definitely ripping all this dirt out of there in this land that has, you know, black mambas and, you know, lots of things that will kill you, and probably lots of things that are also, I don't know, maybe important to the world. And you're thinking, maybe I should have a bigger awareness of this. How do I have a bigger awareness of it? And instead of just saying that's awkward and I feel uncomfortable, I was like, okay, let's go lean into the awkwardness. Like, how do I actually do that? What does that look like? And that's what became what is now Legato, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
And all right, so between Namibia, wasn't I somehow? Was I on the list to go? Maybe.
Did we
something?
talk? Oh.
Yeah, I think you talked to me about going.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. Yeah,
I don't remember why I couldn't go.
Yeah. Namibia was awesome. You missed out. It was freaking amazing.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I was. Yeah, I think you maybe just. Asked
I do remember talking to you about that.
And for some reason I couldn't go. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We all came to Carbondale to talk about it.
Oh, that's right.
Totally. Yeah.
Dude.
John? Yeah. Totally.
French,
God, I
the
forgot
guy
about
with the French girlfriend, the filmmaker dude.
Oh yeah, Jeffrey Barbie. Yeah. That's so funny.
That's right. Yeah, I totally forgot.
Oh my God, I totally forgot about that. God, we've known each other a long time.
Yeah. Seen some shit.
Yeah. Exactly.
Anyhow, so anyway, I was just trying to frame that time wise, and then
Namibia happened. The film came out in 2010, and I like started thinking about Mozambique in 2011.
Okay.
Actually 2010 I started planning it, and then 2011 I went. Yeah.
And instead of just going on the trip, created this project or this idea
from the very beginning.
Well, how did you even get wind of that thing?
Of the place that we went, Mount Namuli, started asking biologists. So like basically looked at reports, knew that I like poured over Google Earth, and I was like, what are these cool? And there'd been this group of South Africans who'd gone and climbed some of these different Inselbergs and talked to them, and realized like once I got in close on them, I was like, okay, like there's vegetation. Like, let's just call it as it is. Like, what about this could be interesting, right? And where could I provide value? So got in touch with one of the great scientists who spent a lot of time in that area named Jonathan Timberlake, and said, hey, where can I help? Where can these skills that I have help? And he's like, Mount Namuli, that's amazing. You got to go there. And started looking at pictures and got really fired up, and initially looked at these pictures and there are all these dark streaks coming down. I was like, oh my God, those are cracks. It's going to be so great. There's like 7 cracks on this entire mountain. It is like granite that's forms like none other. There are no flipping cracks there and no continuous crack systems. And it's just like desperado.
What are the black streaks?
They are actually vegetation.
Oh.
And water runnels. Right. You're like, oh, not so much.
Yeah, granite doesn't always crack.
Yeah, which is it's nice when it does. But
totally.
Got really good at pulling it off, slinging grass summits. So,
and probably a lot of grooves. Is it like the groovy stuff?
It's no. I mean, it's actually really tacky. So if you could just face climb and believe in the fact that you're never going to fall, you're going to do great. And literally, we would be like, you'd be grabbing these grass hummocks and standing on them, and we ended up like bolting on lead and putting bolts in for belays and wrap stations and stuff like that. So because it was the only way to feel there's one iota of intelligence. And then and especially because you're not just climbing it, you're bringing scientists up on there, right? So you're like, okay, cool. Now like deal with all this excavation and look for ants, or go look in that giant, the one hanging chimney and see if which snakes you can find in there. So you're putting all these like forces, let alone some hysteria, like on
go see what kind of snakes you can find in there.
Yeah, that's why you always travel with a herpetologist.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
things I've learned.
So this is not a climbing resource.
No. Let's emphasize that again.
Looking for snakes on your climb. Well, let's kind of wrap up that discussion of Legato with, obviously you're super motivated. You're obviously optimistic about this, and I think it's probably difficult to be optimistic always when you're in these places where, again, that pressure's there, probably a poverty that we're not used to around here. And again, like to tell people to kind of, if not sacrifice now, to maybe make some changes now for the future is probably really tricky. But what do you think the next steps are for you, and the progress that you're going to make? Is the government making promises or other things happening?
I mean, we've now been able to, I would say we're now doing the real work. I think it's taken us this long to be able to get to that point in terms of, getting the right team assembled, getting the right information. I mean, we didn't even have an accurate number of how many people lived on this mountain because there'd been no like real census data, no surveys about everybody who lived encircling it. So, we are now working hand in hand with these communities, and hopefully what's going to happen is in this next year, they're going to declare a moratorium, and they're going to stop cutting and stop burning in those upland rainforests. And then we're going to get down and dirty with what it's going to mean to keep that commitment. And then hopefully bring this set of solutions to other mountain areas. So be able to say, these were the ingredients, this is what we found worked, let's take it to another mountain area and obviously change it to be unique to that exact location, but also be able to use those tools and to use those resources and use those funders and say, let's see if we can replicate this and create a series of these small grassroots conservation initiatives that are community led.
But do you think that you have to have a presence the word enforcement is sort of in my head.
Enforcement happens. I mean, that comes from the community. So there are like patrols that they set up to enforce it all.
Because it just sounds, there's always also that issue of you teach everybody, let's say that you teach everybody to have, better output from the piece of land that they already have. And it's sustaining them, it's still going to be then desirable to be like, well, I want more land.
Yeah, so I can have more output for the other piece of land.
Yeah, then I can get twice as much after I burn all that down. And it feels like sometimes that these things that happen, when you have, again, like outdoorsy groups or whatever going and doing whatever it is, we're going to give these people, stoves or solar power or whatever. And then you split, and then, the solar panel breaks.
Yeah.
You know,
what's
5
the
years later,
long-term-
is anybody there to be like, oh yeah, you need another solar panel?
Or what you should have done is had a solar panel that was fixable and had made sure someone was trained to do that.
You know, and I'm making that up. I don't necessarily have a.
No, I know what you mean.
But
I mean, it's sort of like, what's the difference between
longevity of your
program. What does it mean to naively do something versus like really, and for us, it comes down to the fact that like, this is not something that of walking away. I mean, like there will be a conscious program working with those local communities on Namuli, most likely, very accelerated for the next 5 years, but for the next like 25 years, there's going to be a commitment to like doing what's called capacity building and support and making sure that, the tools are being used, that the communities have what they need. But it has to, again, like that has to come with ownership from the communities. Right. So it's much, in some ways, it's much trickier than just putting together a national park, right? Because if you can isolate something, then you can control it more. Right. If you can't isolate something, then it really comes down to the relationships with the communities and what they ultimately want and them seeing it. And so, there's a host of different sort of partners and theories that we're using in trainings. I mean, we just had this great thing where, we kind of used like campaigning, like advertising, and talk, like these, like the people on Namuli wrote a song about what it means to preserve Namuli, and they did it. They used specific language because they went and interviewed and said like, what words would trigger you? It's like, what would make you drink a Coke? Well, the same theories that go into advertising are now being used in conservation for that. It's like, what would make you stop burning down the land? Okay, if you heard it this way, okay, so we're going to come back to you and we're going to sing you this awesome little jingle. Do you like it? Yeah. Do you love Namuli more? Great. And I mean, that's like, those are things that we're employing across the map. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. And I mean, really, we're sitting here in Jackson, New Hampshire, right? And like, we're not in Mozambique. And the reason this works is because I have an awesome team in Mozambique, and I am, I'm the founder and the executive director of this, but I should not be running this long term. The long-term fit is that this is going to be run more locally, and and that's ultimately the goal. But I'm the person, and Legato is the group that's been able to push it to this level this far.
How long? What's like the longest stint you've even done there?
In Mozambique, a month straight.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm, when things started getting accelerating, I definitely was thinking like, will I move to Mozambique?
Right.
And then I got pregnant with twins.
Right.
And I was like, I don't think I'm going to move to Mozambique and have my twins there. In part because my life is a climber, frankly, because I was like, that's basically saying goodbye to that. And God damn it, I want to do it all, and it's like, so I'm going to figure out how to pull this off, how to be a climber, how to be a mom, how to, have a really bad head cold when I talk to you.
Yeah, that's fun. So climbing, you started to imply a little bit that your climbing wasn't necessarily sustainable, but that's not true. It's in terms of living, you're making your living from it every day, banging it out. It seemed like your body just wouldn't sustain that.
It's like I needed something else.
Right.
And that way I didn't have to just like push myself guiding all the time. I could have something else, and then and that actually opened it up for me. And that's when I became like a pro climber, right? Because I could actually step away from guiding all the time.
Yeah, it's really hard to be a really good climber as a guide.
It's super. And some people do it. I mean, my husband definitely does it, but like, for me, that just wasn't the right mix of ingredients. So that let me like pursue climbing and, be able to start working with companies that I work with, and,
So it's still in your life.
Yeah.
In a huge way.
Hugely in my life. Yeah. I mean, I still climb. I mean,
Yeah. So tell me, let's talk about that a little bit. We'll get personal and away from the Legato thing. An old school Enormocast question is, what kind of climber are you?
I'm a rock and ice climber. Yeah. I used to be an alpine climber, and I do a fair amount of alpine climbing still, but like I used to be obsessed with like wanting to go to the big mountains. That's not as much on my, I mean, when I was 20, I was like, I want to go to K2.
Right.
Like, nah, that's not really an objective of mine right now. But climbing like super hard. Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, we should have gone back in the day. We would have been a sick team. Perfect, Do you want to go now?
No.
Yeah, see?
No, not at all. Yeah. I would go look at it maybe.
Yeah.
That looks like a lovely valley.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
But, and did that kind of, those passions change before the kids? Because, I mean, that's one of the big things about suddenly becoming a Himalayan climber late in life.
Yeah.
That it seems like it'd be a little bit irresponsible. It's one thing to kind of keep doing it.
Yeah. But to change and actively
after you
get
have
out.
kids,
Yeah,
like,
that'd be a little questionable.
Steph would, there's no way that would happen in my house.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just going to drop all this rock climbing and go to the Himalayas.
Yeah, exactly. Does that sound like a good idea, babe? You want to support me in this?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that happened for me, I would say. I just like technical climbing.
Right.
And I don't like waiting around a lot. Mm-hmm. So I'm better suited to, these like fun, the expeditions that I've done, and going to do like first ascent on these, different cool rock formations around the world, and ice climbing and doing like, technical alpine mix stuff is really fun. But, doing all that at 8,000 meters or 7,000 meters is not as it's just not right now where my passion is. And now that I have these two little kids, you're right. Like I've sort of let that die off enough that I don't know if I would be like, I am doing an expedition to put a new route on Pamori next year. Like that just doesn't make a lot of sense.
No. And like I said, it's fine. I mean, you make your choices as a parent and good and bad, but
yeah. I mean, I can get really scared 10 minutes from my house climbing and make like choices that are pretty questionable in terms of like
being a parent.
Yeah, exactly, to most of the world. And, as evidenced by my father commenting on my Facebook post. And I'm like, Dad, just don't look at Facebook. Like, you don't want to see when I'm climbing. It does not make you comfortable.
Well, I mean, in terms of, I guess, women's issues in climbing, that's one that's kind of not as well known and talked about, but this idea, that, I mean, anybody who looks outside of climbing into climbing can be like, you can't do that, you're a parent, to men and women, but
to women especially,
it's way more of this pressure to like, no, you need to calm down because your children need you.
Or it's like, you won't want, what I loved when I was pregnant is like, oh, you won't want to do that anymore, and this total expectation, like, oh, just wait for it, honey, like your life's going to change, and like this desire you have to, and like this elation you feel. And I mean, I remember last summer.
That's coming from other women.
Yeah. And it's also coming from men, and what was really.
Oh, come on. A dude told you that? Like, you're going to feel this huge elation.
Dude, are you... Or like, no, a dude told me like, oh, you think you're going to want to keep climbing now, but you're not. Oh, really? Like, oh, totally. When so I was at the Outdoor Retailer show, not when we did our interview, but I had just found out I was pregnant with twins. So I was like 3 months pregnant, looked like I was 6 months pregnant, and I was like cruising around the show and just being like, telling people like I'm pregnant with twins, and I'd say I'm pregnant, and people would be like, oh my God, that's amazing, and I'd say with twins, and they're like, oh, you're fucked. Like constantly, and it got to the point where I had to come up with a response to it. Like, and they were like, oh, great, you're pregnant. You're going to be one of those families that like, you're going to all move into your Eurovan and it's going to be great. Oh, you're having twins. Oh, say goodbye. There went your whole climbing passion. And I was like, wow, that's really, and to me, like whenever something like that is launched at me, I just get like super uppity, like a little porcupine. And I'm like, I'll show you.
You're the greatest mom of twins ever.
And climb
V14.
I don't think I can actually climb like V8. So.
Yeah, well.
Bouldering not.
That's pretty
real
hardcore.
Climbing? Sorry, but
The real climbing, oh man. You just blew up my inbox.
No.
So let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, it's an issue that not just women, but anybody who's got this very, self-centered life to a certain extent. Although, you had kind of moved on to, a little bit of outreach away from that. Anyway, but having kids is a big deal to climbers. Some climbers are like so allergic to them that like I can go to I remember being in Rifle and having Miles, the Enormo baby, strapped to my chest. And, dudes coming up and talking to me for 10 or 15 minutes and like never losing eye contact to like glance down to like a baby that's attached to my chest. Never asking anything about the baby. Just talking the same old beta, blah, 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 and then like disappearing. Like if they acknowledged the baby, it was like a disease they were going to catch. And so anyway, let's talk a little bit about that because it's a decision people I think wrestle with, at least in climbing a little bit.
Totally.
I'm not afraid to admit that it was thrust upon me due to biology and
not understanding biology.
Yeah, I was like, biology.
45 years. But you guys were making a choice. You didn't obviously choose twins, but it happened.
Yeah.
And it happened naturally.
Yeah.
And so anyway, what do you say to folks that are worried about it, and what do you think your resources are that have allowed you to continue to be a climber and to live this lifestyle? And it could I'm looking out your window right now. We're near North Conway, and the geography is important.
It's super important.
Yeah.
I mean, geography is huge, and living here and having the access to amazing rock climbing, even better ice climbing, in my opinion. I think this is like the premier place to live in the U.S. if you're an ice and mixed climber. You can just get it done, and lots of different conditions present themselves for the whole winter. And you can go climb, and you can go do real stuff, and you can get home. And that was important before I was a parent. And now it's really important as a parent. And I think that for me, it wasn't like there was not an option that being a parent was going to make me stop climbing. It's like those two things aren't in this opposition in that black and white way. It's so much more gray, right? And that's the thing you realize when you are a person as well as a parent, is that climbing becomes gray in your life, right? Because it's such kind of like this narcissistic pursuit. It takes so much time. Sometimes I wish I could just be, like a marathon runner. I mean, that takes a lot of time, but honestly, you can like go bang out your run, and you're probably not going to be training for more than, a couple hours a day. Right. And you go climbing, and to really be a good climber, you have to devote a lot more time to it. So that means you're taking time away from other things, unless you don't sleep, which does not work for me. So I think that's a question you always have to be asking yourself. And then there's this other dirty little secret that we rarely talk about with climbing, which is like a job, right? Like, and you're like, oh, it's all about like, are you gonna be a mom? Are you gonna be, it's like, well, how are you gonna make money? How are you actually like, assuming that that's something that you have to do to exist, like how do you pull that off? And that's its other pressure. And I feel like sometimes we divorce that reality so much from the climbing conversation, in part because there's this ideology that we all are dirtbags at heart, and we might all love to go sleep in the dirt. But there's also, people who have to do things like care for aging parents, like take care of an actual life, figure out how to pay a mortgage, buy the sick van. And so like for me, climbing has always had to happen in concert with other things. So it's a lot harder to do it in concert with parenting, but it's not new for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And I think like, I don't know, what would I say, Chris? I'm a mindful climber. Like, we all make our own rationalizations, right? Like, I don't do that, I do this. I'm safer because of this. Like, you look at people who die, you look at your friends, and you're like, well, what happened? Okay, I won't do that. Like, I'll make a different choice, right? And whether or not you say it out loud, or whether or not you think it, we're all, like, you have that moment because you're trying to, like, make sure that you're on a different path, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's very, convenient that our brain works like that. It's not going to happen to me. It happened to them.
Yeah.
I mean, and it goes for everything. Like anybody who's like, has the hubris to text all the time when they're driving. Yeah. It's like, we know statistically you're a total terror, but you're going to be able to handle it, or whatever happens to be.
Yeah. And it's like super important that I like
so make climbing wise too. It's like, no, I'm safe.
I'm good. I got this.
Yeah. So.
But I mean, I do like, I'm a very safe climber, and I try to be really safe, and I try to choose objectives, and I try to really, I guess the thing that I would say is I try to listen to my gut. Right. Like that's I feel like the thing that I'm most responsible to is we all have that moment, and we know whether or not maybe that moment comes too soon and we don't push ourselves enough, or maybe it doesn't come soon enough and we're like always like getting hurt, but like for me, I feel like I have to trust that. And especially now as a mom, it's like if I get this moment, I'm like, this doesn't feel good, or like maybe like with ice climbing, which like I'm super passionate about, and it's like maybe I should place another screw, I put another screw in, and like I went and did this climb a couple weeks ago that I've wanted to do here forever, and it's never like been in condition, and I've been in the right space to do it. I was climbing with a friend of mine named Ray Rice, who's like local legend. He's like super awesome, badass, and good friend of mine, and gives me reams of a hard time. And he's like, seriously, you're gonna put another screw in? He's like, you have a screw at your foot. And he's like, actually, that's at your knee. I'm like, I don't care. My brain is telling me that like and I was like, it will take me longer. I will hold on more. I will be more pumped, but I will pull this off. You know? And like so those are sort of the choices that I'm making within it, right? And it's like, and I feel okay with that.
Right.
And, yeah.
Yeah, but it is funny because you know, I mean, it's still just like you drew a line.
Yeah.
And that's
it's
your
like an
line.
arbitrary line, right?
Because
like,
my line stopped at ice cream.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, I'm not going to do that.
I mean, it used to be, but then I was just, I mean, it had as much to do, it actually it had more to do with, you know, comfort than necessarily at the risk. Yeah. But it's more of that in retrospect. Yeah. And as I've lived longer and ice climbing's, you know, been fatal to people I know. Yeah. Yeah. More so, at least whatever, maybe just it happened to be statistically than climbing. Like, that's my line. Yeah. So it's, you know, we have our
we all
lines.
have our lines, and we like build up a little house around them, and it's like, this is how this makes sense.
And my extra screw.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm really fast at putting another screw in, you know, and it's
and
like.
that was the difference between me and you crazy risk takers.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And, you know, so and mine is that, like, mine is I don't ice climb other than, you know, once a year in Ouray on top rope. Yeah. If it's warm enough. This year it was a little too cold for me. And you know, we were joking about suddenly becoming a Himalayan climber, but you know, the last couple of times, because there was like a 15-year gap in my ice climbing, and I started ice climbing at Ouray, just, you know, we're there. Yeah. And I was like, this stuff all works way better than it used to. Yeah. Because, you know, I was straight shaft guy that far back. And so, I always, every time I'm there, I get a little bit of, this actually could be cool, maybe. Yeah. Yeah. You know, and I have resources to get my hands on gear. And, you know, so there's a moment where I leave Ouray and I'm like, and also, you know, the park's jammed with people. So we never get to get on anything cool. Yeah. And so I always leave, I'm like, I should just come down here this winter, not on this weekend. Yeah. When I can get like some climbing in, and I'll find, you know, I have tons of friends that. Yeah, and you'll just like have such a good time. Yeah, and they're like pot smokers. It's a slippery slope, though. You know, they want you to ice climb. Yeah. Like it's like their whole thing. Like pot smokers always want you to smoke weed, especially when they find out you don't smoke weed. Yeah. But anyway, and then by the time I get home, though, I'm just like, there's no way I'm going to walk in that door and tell Steph that I'm suddenly an ice climber again. Yeah. You know, because for me, like, again, it's that idea of reintroducing it at this point without like a serious justification. Yeah. Would be really hard. Yeah. You know? And I think it's like. So that's my line, you know? Yeah. It's like, how much am I taking on? How much am I asking if you do have a partner that you're parenting with? Like, and if you're lucky and, let's just say lucky and be positive, like lucky to have a partner that you're parenting with, like it's gonna, you know, there's a mutuality in that decision and there are consequences with it, you know? And I mean, Peter and I are constantly trying to, I mean, we are like so brand new to this still. And we're like, okay, so how is this going to work that we both are climbing for work and we're both climbing personally, and how do trips work? And, you know, are we doing like a tit for tat accounting? And, you know, the other day, like we had this huge conversation. I was like, I want 20 days, God damn it, for being pregnant. Like I want to have earned 20 days for not climbing for the whole time I was pregnant, and like I'm still breastfeeding, so he's like, well, you can go on a trip. I'm like, but I can't because I'm breastfeeding. He's like, well, you can stop breastfeeding. I'm like, that's not fair. I'm like, I just want 20 days. And he's like, really, that's gonna make you happy? I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay, like fine, you have 20 days. Yeah. He's like, you got him. I'm like, thank you. I'm like, if you could just start with that, this whole thing would have gone so much more smoothly. Just 20 days. No, I'll probably not want to take 20 days in a row for a really long time, but I just want to know I got 20 days, Chris. Like, you know, it just makes me feel better. It's like, I'm like, I can breathe, you know? Okay. I got 20 days. That's
I need
cool.
Them. Yeah.
I just got handed 2 weeks. Yeah. 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 At the end of May.
Yeah. See?
So, yeah.
You're just like, yeah.
Yeah. It was out of the blue, but, yeah. Cool. So, well, I mean, what's your plan with weaning?
Well, I'm going to Mozambique for 2 weeks in August. Okay. So that's definitely going to have to happen before then. Okay. Or I'm going to get on the plane and just say, you know, I love you, and the kids will, by the time I come.
Weaning them. Yeah. Have fun putting up with. That would be awesome. Have fun trying to get them to eat.
And I'll try not to have a breast infection when I'm in Mozambique. It'll be, you know?
Yeah, that would be unfortunate.
Yeah, they're great. They're going to do just fine.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah. You know, and like you just said, economics plays into everything. Yeah. In terms of how you can get it done. And
you know, we live in New Hampshire, and the cost of living here, I mean, we used to live in Boulder, and I mean, those are totally different realities. Right. And one of the reasons we made the choice to fully move here was because we could do more. We could go, like, our money can go further here, right? You know, and so it's like we can, like, we can actually try to carve the time out to have climbing time together, versus feel like we both have to be working, 45, 50 hours a week. And then how do you have that extra time?
Right.
And to me, it's also really important to be a mom. Like, I didn't just I want to spend time with my kids. I want to be able to enjoy it and not just and that's something that I'm always trying to check in with myself. I don't just want to be with my kids on the margin of everything, right? I want to make the choices to be with my kids.
Well, and it's interesting you say that, because even this whole conversation up until you said that, it can seem like, from the moment the kids pop out, now we're scheming, to get away from them. Yeah,
exactly.
And it's, and I do think you can sort of catch yourself in that mode of wait a second, am I really obsessing about getting away from this thing that I actually totally enjoy?
Yep.
But the reality of it is that, there's a point at which, what happened with mine, with Steph giving me 2 weeks, is that I was gone. I took him for Christmas by myself.
Oh, okay.
And Steph, because she had to work. And so it was really the first kind of big block. Yeah. And when I got home, she's like, you really need to do that too. Yeah. Because it was it actually was really nice once, I caught up with sleep, which took a few days.
Yeah, exactly.
And then all of a sudden I was normal again.
Yeah.
And she's like, you need to experience that as well.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't really pushed for it.
Yeah.
But part of me wasn't pushing for it because I didn't want to seem, and also I didn't, I kind of felt a little bit of guilt of that, of am I really scheming to get away from this little guy?
Yeah.
But then you become neurotic. So you have to just remember.
It's so hard. Yeah. And for me, what I try to do is I'm every week I look at I kind of look at the week and I say, okay, what is the really fun thing I'm going to try to do with the kids this week? And part of the times it backfires because they're throwing up then and blah, 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 but I'm okay, great. I don't, and when I say the margins, because, our kids go to this Montessori program, we have some help, and it'd be pretty easy for me to only see my kids, most days from 5 o'clock on. But the whole point of living the life I live is that I don't have to do that. I can choose to work sometimes at night, and I can frankly, kids aren't that fun every night. You're about to see my kids from 5:30 to 6:30 is not their prime time, So it's why would you only choose to be with you? It's if you don't have to. And I'm in the position in life because of the career that I have and how I can work at different times where I don't. So I try to remind myself and call BS on myself about it a little bit, and be okay, cool. No, I will take the hit and work late into the night on that day so that I can spend this awesome morning going to music class with my kids and then going sledding.
Yeah, because they're more fun.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, I'm sure people listening with kids, they're nodding their heads yes, and sometimes they're shaking their heads no, because their situation's completely different, and they don't. They do have the 9 to 5er, and so.
But then they're also probably trying to make the time on the weekends. Most weekends I'm guiding or so it's it'd be really easy to get yourself into that position. And, I want to have
everything.
Yeah, and I want to go live on a sailboat with my kids for a year, and I don't know how to sail. I don't know if I'll pull that off, but that's this dream of mine, right? I'm that sounds so cool. Mm-hmm. I'm oh yeah, that probably wouldn't mean climbing. Okay, that's cool anyway.
I want to do Columbia with them.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to do that either.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
you have these dreams, and you're okay, when and how? How do I do this?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, let's just bring it back again. So you think this is, your sort of direction for the foreseeable future in terms of growing this program in Mozambique, and then this hopefully passing that off to start something else or
working with it to bring it to these other mountain areas, so basically leading that charge.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, but
what does that look? What would that look like in terms of an organization?
So what that looks like from an organizational standpoint is we say, okay, here's there's another mountain in Mozambique that we've been looking at, and we've been saying, okay, the biodiversity level is off the charts, the human population pressure is there. So how do we go in? And it's well, again, we partner with local organizations, so it's very much somewhat formulaic and somewhat not,
so
right?
Hopefully you can have this
this sort of a pliable framework.
Exactly. And one of the things we're trying to do is like
flexible.
really open source the framework and also be really critical about it and continue like refine it and say, okay, this worked. And granted, then you have to take it to the next place and say, well, that actually doesn't work here, that part of it. But the idea of it does work. And so how can you then like keep recasting it? And to me is...
I
mean, it's all about scaling it, right? It's about, and to me, that's fascinating to actually be able to like, because you can have so much more impact and you can actually like move the needle on this greater conversation of mountain conservation. And that's the thing that I'm obsessed with.
Because I mean, it seems like that's also the Achilles heel of so many of these organizations where they've come in with something that worked somewhere else and then just beat their head against the wall.
And then they're just like entrenched in it.
And force it down the throats of the new situation. So
that's a great point. And I think that part of this has to, I think the roots of what we've done have been like, okay, it's like, really nimble. It's really, like I've said, it was scrappy from the beginning and we continue to use that. And I think like when we stop doing that, if Legato becomes a lumbering giant multinational NGO that can't have maneuverability and we basically became the thing that said no to us in the beginning, then I have a problem, right? Like that's not the goal of this. It's to actually...
You need an intervention.
Yeah, please intervene.
When you're showing up in high heels and like a linen pants to your outpost,
There you go. You can have the intervention then.
You guys are all driving your SUVs.
I love it. You have this whole image, Yeah.
Well, I mean, it seems like sometimes these big NGOs, it's like the people running them are so detached from what is
actually
happening.
is.
And that image, doors open up and out you come and with your parasol. And
I mean,
how's everything going, boys?
But it takes all of it to actually, I mean, that's the thing is once you're in the trenches with anything, right? With parenting, with climbing, with conservation work, you suddenly are like a lot more appreciative of what everybody else is doing and what they have done to move, to move us along. And you get like why it becomes that way. You get why you want to have 16 projects because then you have enough critical mass and enough critical funds in the bank account that you can move around versus like waiting to make sure your next grant of $4,000, which is a godsend for us. And we are deeply appreciative of all of you listening who want to give us that from your, personal bank account or family foundation. But when you're sitting there waiting for that to be able to green light the work that you're doing, you're like, oh yeah, that's why a big NGO is a really nice thing.
Well, why don't you try next time to conserve a mountain that has better climbing on it? Because then you could do both. Then that would start, fulfill your...
I know. That's awesome. I will keep that in mind, Clues, because I'm trying to help climbers be better than ourselves, right?
I know. I'm joking.
Yeah, I know. You're it's classic. I'll work on that.
No, you people, you guys keep logging. This mountain's worthless. We're going somewhere that's got better
has
rock.
No cracks. Like, we really don't want to pay attention to it,
Well, my joke highlights the fact that it's good for you. It plays well on you. Like I pointed out in the beginning of this, is that this is not saving a climbing area for climbing, which is fine, and not to bust on the people that do that, because that needs to be done. And I'm all for it and I'm involved in it in some ways. But it is interesting that wasn't. I mean, that climbing is not really the issue here. It's sort of this even like a global conservation idea. Of anyway. Well, great. Thanks for sitting down.
You bet. I hope this one sticks.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, you want to go hang out with the twins?
I do. Are they home?
I bet they're gonna be home in a moment. They'll come put their sticky hands all over you. You're like in it.
Look,
I know.
Kidding?
I'm like, we have a professional. I told them, I'm like, we have a dad who knows all about your age. Like, he's gonna, I
do.
We're actually, Peter and I are gonna go on a date. You're gonna take care of the kids.
This is what this is all about.
Hell yeah, sweet.
I would actually. I'd totally be happy to do that.
Okay, as long as you give them both baths, because that's what's really exciting by yourself.
Really?
Yeah, 2-on-1 baths.
I tell you, the whole, I mean, I was one of these...
We should have done this after you saw the twins.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, you were talking about people going like, you're fucked.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't say quite that. My emails were like, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it. I can't imagine. Because we talk about it all the time. We talk about that. And also being a single parent.
Yeah.
I'm just like, whew.
Yeah.
Good on you. And that whole conversation we just had about how to make life work. I mean,
who knows?
Yeah.
I know. So much respect for I mean, that's the thing. It's so freaking humanizing to become a parent.
Yeah,
you're like,
for sure.
Oh, I am not that special. Like, everybody does this, and everybody goes through this, and it's so hard. You just like, you feel like you walk around the grocery store just bowing down to everybody and be like, oh my God, I just give so much more respect to everybody in the world because of going through this experience.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You like had sort of a disdain for breeders.
Normalcy. Yeah, and just like normal people, you're like, I'm not normal. Right. And then you're like, oh, I am so normal. Like, I am being thrown up on. I am like, dealing with boogers. I have like a total tantrum kid. Like, you are just like normal. And that's, I think, maybe a great way to be a human.
All right, folks, thanks for listening. And thanks to Majka for having me into her home to sit down, get this one done while the twins were off playing with the babysitter. And her husband, Peter, was out guiding. So we kind of got it done in the afternoon just before the kids got home. Perfect. I think of this one as part of a suite with last episode, 145 with Mary Harlan. Two women trying to have it all, trying to get it done, trying to keep climbing. And Majka's chosen to keep it a little more within climbing than Mary, but her conservation efforts obviously go much beyond climbing. So hats off to her trying to juggle all that stuff. I actually saw it going down when the twins got home, juggling, almost literally juggling twins. And if you are interested in what Majka has going on, especially over in Mozambique, you can go to majkaburhardt.com, click on social enterprises and legado. That's where you'll find the stuff. And yeah, Majka's a little weird to spell. You'll figure it out, but I'll give you a hint. You wouldn't be the first one to call her Majka. And remember, if you want to help out the podcast, you can by going to enormocast.com, clicking on the Help Out tab, my junky 8th grade project website. And there's a list of things you can do to help out the podcast, including, if you feel so inclined, donating to the podcast. And I know, podcasts are free. You can get them for free, but I think that donating to things like this, and I throw some money around to all sorts of things in the climbing community, helps you feel connected. So consider it. A little bit of money from a lot of people goes a long way to help this thing keep going. All right. Enough about finance. At least in North America, the spring has sprung in many places across the continent. It's always a good time to review your safety the first few times you get out on warm, delicious rock and are overwhelmed by the beauty of it all. Remember, use communication, make sure your gear's in order, and of course, check your knot.
Animalia, phylum, chordata. The class is Mammalia, cause boobies, we gotta.
Order is primate, family hominidity, the genus is Homo. But you know you're enemy.
Cause I am in the species known as sapien. Dogs used to eat me, but now they bring the paper in.
It's gonna take a lot to get me away from you.
Damn.
There's nothing that 100 men or more could ever do.
Sapien.
I bless the rains down in Africa.
Oh, bless the
I bless the rains down in Africa. I bless the rains down in Africa.
The teachers told me that's where it's at.